Welcome to, what is this, the 6th annual Secular Humanist Society anniversary and Charlie Darwin Day banquet. Thank you all, especially for coming out on a night like this, of course. And we're going to have a presentation, most of which I've already seen, by David Orenstein, some of you know as the Paleolibrarian, on Charles Darwin and the idea that changed the world. And there he is.
I want to just quickly thank John, of course, for inviting me this evening, and I appreciate your confidence, your lovely wife Donna, Carl, who's doing the videography tonight, the board. I appreciate your time, your effort, your energy, and your trust. I see old friends, and I have to say at the table I sat at in the back, I've met some new friends, and that's the nice thing about, I think, the humanist community, is that we really do come together, and we come together very, very well. So, you know, I've got, let me just make sure I have the Pinsky family, who came from Ukraine. And it shows that the free thought family, the rational family that stays together as free thought people really do eat together very, very well and make wonderful conversation. So raise your hand. I'm sorry for embarrassing you, but it's their first time here, and please welcome them.
They came just for this.
That's right. That's right. You know, there's this saying amongst anthropologists. There's this joke. This primatologist is working at the zoo, and he sees a bonobo chimpanzee, and he's reading both the Origin of Species and also the Bible. And the primatologist, the anthropologist, signs, "Why are you reading both of those?" And the chimpanzee signs back, "Well, I want to know if my brother's keeper or my keeper's brother." If you don't get it, hopefully on the ride home, you'll get it. I thought we'd start with some community building. So what I want to do is start with a puzzle. Name that quote. And to show a little bit of what our ideas are up against, both in the 19th, 20th, and 21st century. So, if you've already paid for your meal, I will reimburse you. There are 12 quotes, and you have to know the person and the century. Okay, and if you get all of those, and we'll do them real quickly, we'll go through them very quickly. The first one: is it on your grandmother or grandfather's side that you are descended from an ape? Okay. Yes, Bishop Wilberforce, 19th century, in the debate with Thomas Henry Huxley. Thank you. All right. So you've got a ringer in here. Okay, clearly. All right, let's see. All right, that's one down. How about this one? Evolutionary Darwinists need to understand that we are taking the dinosaurs back. This is a battle cry to recognize the science in the revealed truth of God. Ken Ham. Could you please leave? Yes, 21st century. So we've got 19th and 21st century. How about this one? I'm not a scientist, man. I don't know how old the Earth is. It's one of the great mysteries.
Who's running for president?
What? Marco Rubio, Republican from Florida, 21st century. Yay. The parents have a right to say that no teacher paid by their money shall rob their children of faith in God and send them back to their homes skeptical or infidels or agnostic or atheists. Ooh. Anybody? William Jennings Bryan, 20th century, in the Scopes Monkey trial. All right, here's one for you. Christians, like slaves and soldiers, ask no questions. All right, Jerry Falwell, 20th century.
Oh, it's a recommendation.
Okay, here we go. It's a little long. Hence, all faithful Christians are forbidden to defend as the legitimate conclusions of science those opinions which are known to be contrary to the doctrine of faith. particularly if they have been condemned by the church. And furthermore, they are absolutely bound to hold them to be errors which wear the deceptive appearance of truth. That was 19th century Pope Pius IX, who was the Pope at the time the Origin of Species was published. Okay, here we go. So far I'm holding on to my money, but you guys are doing a good job. In freely willing to create and conserve the universe, God wills to activate and to sustain, in fact, all those secondary causes which actively contribute to the unfolding of the natural order which he intends to produce. Through the activity of natural causes, God causes to arise those conditions required for the emergence and support of living organisms, and furthermore, for their reproduction and differentiation.
Sounds like bullshit.
Well, it is the Catholic Church, which is synonymous. And you see from the 19th century to the 21st century, this adoption, okay? We'll accept the natural order of things, but God started it all. Okay, the fallback position of the church has, need I say, evolved. Okay, from the absolutism of the 19th century, where this is against church doctrine, to, okay, you know, all these things really happened, but God started it all. So, you know, let's live with that. Unlike Ken Ham, who is, you know, if you saw the Nye-Ham debate, you know that was, you know, the Earth is 6,000 years old, and that's pretty darn scary. Evolution, the Big Bang Theory, and embryology are all lies straight from the pit of hell.
Representative Broom.
Very good. Representative John Brown, Republican from Georgia, who, by the way, 21st century, who, by the way, is a physician. Okay.
On the
Can imagine how
committee.
big his insurance is.
Okay, he must have gone to like Liberty University or something like that. Yes.
And he's on the science, he is a chair, I think, of the Science Committee
Yes.
of the House of Representatives.
Okay, so you're seeing what we're sort of up against in terms of.
Practice insurance must cost a fortune.
You see what we're up against consistently, right, through almost 300 years now, okay, of Darwin's brilliance. Let us hope it's not true, but if it is, let us pray it does not become widely known.
That was mid-19th century.
That is 19th century. That is the Bishop of Birmingham's wife, who, when reacting to when hearing about evolution and natural selection, that was her quote.
That's the smartest quote.
It's a girl.
Okay, here we go. This is a fun one. The Supreme Court has insulted you over and over again, Lord. They've taken your Bible away from the schools. They've forbidden little children to pray. They've taken the knowledge of God as best they can. And organizations have come into court to take the knowledge of God out of the public square of America. That's Pat Robertson, 20th century. Okay. Believing in evolution is believing in the unproved, while believing in Christ is believing in the proven.
The psych ward in Bellevue?
That is the late Edwin Lewis Cole, 20th century preacher, who's not an evangelical, but you see this throughout all of faith. And one of my favorites, evolution is unobservable. It's based on blind faith and a few dry bones on unreliable dating systems in which the gullible trust. Are you all gullible? You all consider yourself gullible? Yeah, you all look pretty gullible. Yeah, okay. Kids should be allowed to make up their own minds, right? Teach the controversy where there is none, okay? About this issue, and not be censored. This is Marco Rubio, by the way, right? You know, okay. Well, it isn't, but this is who he's politicking towards, and not be censored one way or the other, or one side is all we will let them hear. This is Ray Comfort. Okay, you may know the political. He's an evangelical minister. He's written a couple of books. When the presidential debates were going on, I believe he moderated one or two of them. Do we remember? Okay, yeah, we probably have this anemic reaction to most people of the faith who are rejectionists of natural selection, things like that. But He's considered, if you're running for major political office, the guy to know to sway certain elements of the voting public. But you know, I think we in the secular non-faith world tend to have a relatively good sense of humor and self-deprecation about ourselves, who we are, understanding, of course, that we can laugh at ourselves, basically. So if you see this, and it might be hard to read on the bottom, this is a Gary Larson cartoon from a little while ago. It says, the real reasons the dinosaurs became extinct, and if you notice, they're all smoking. Okay. Now, I don't think anyone in this room is going to create a fatwa, right? No one is so insulted where they're going to put death threats against Gary Larson for doing something like this. In fact, we all sort of get the joke, okay? But what is very chilling is something like this. Okay, this is a photograph from the internet, from the Creation Museum, where you see this lovely child and a Velociraptor, and they're just sort of hanging out together. You know, it's factually untrue, geologically untrue. Yeah, hold on. Okay, and just really a work of fiction.
And that kid wouldn't last 2 seconds with one of
And,
those.
you know, if you accept, as I like to say and as I like to teach, if you accept this and this view of natural selection and evolution, then really you're doing what I call Flintstone science. Okay? Because if you notice, now Hanna-Barbera, I love them. I grew up with the Flintstones in the 60s. I'm a child of the 60s. And I loved the Flintstones, but I never saw it as science. I don't know if any of you ever did. Yes?
Now, I knew a woman, a graduate of one of the Seven Sisters colleges, who told my first wife that when my first wife asked her, why do you watch the Flintstones? You really watch the Flintstones? She said, well, I just like to see how they did things back in those days.
Okay, so someone who clearly follows the Ken Ham approach to the natural world. You know, but we've come here today to praise Charles Darwin and not to bury him, because while he may be gone, his ideas are fresh and alive and relevant and important across not only the ontological nature of what we do and the philosophical nature, but so many of the physical and natural sciences depend on what this man observed, wrote about, speculated. But this was a man who, for all his brilliance, was known to be a real recluse later in life. This was a man who really despised and was fearful of confrontation. A man who wrote brilliantly but spoke very rarely publicly. And he did so because, you know, he felt a lot of guilt about what natural selection, and one of the reasons why it was 20 years before, from the Voyage of the Beagle to the publication of The Origin of Species. One of the reasons why he waited as long as he did, aside from the fact that Alfred Russel Wallace was coming fast on his heels with the same ideas, was that because he knew the pain that his ideas were going to cause his wife, who he loved incredibly, who was religious and saw herself as a Christian, and who felt to her dying day that she and Charles would not be in the same place. He was fearful, of course, of what it meant for English society, where, if you remember, in the 19th century, okay, the sun never set on the British Empire. He was fearful about his own and his family's place in that society, because he was a very wealthy person and an aristocratic in a way. You know, each of these areas really followed the pinnacle of church doctrine, right? Whether it be the micro aspect of his wife, or his social status, or his society at the time. And so he was really, really challenged and almost heartbroken by having to publish. But he did because it was the right thing to do. And he knew that you can't stop truth, okay, with lies or with non-opinion. But because he was so fearful, we have to thank Charles Darwin for giving us the ammunition to know the world as it truly is in nature. But it wasn't Charles Darwin, okay? It was several people: T.H. Huxley, Alfred Russel Wallace, J.W. Draper, J.D. Hooker, Asa Gray. These are names you may or may not be knowledgeable about. But these were the men who I like to call Darwin's apostles, who fought the good fight for Darwin. Okay? Of course, we know T.H. Huxley is Darwin's bulldog. We know Alfred Russel Wallace as a contemporary of Darwin. And I have some notes here, but I'm going to go through very, very quickly. John Wilbur Draper was an American of British descent. He wrote this book about how the church actually impeded science knowledge for hundreds, if not thousands of years. J.D. Hooker was a confidant of Charles Darwin and actually was a contemporary of Huxley, and they together spoke with Wilberforce in one of the great debates. Asa Gray was an American who actually helped secure the rights to The Origin of Species to be published here in the United States. And each of these men, we owe the same debt of gratitude that we owe to Charles Darwin. But we don't necessarily know them very well unless we really spend our time thinking about them and realizing their importance. So I just wanted to say, we know this is Darwin Day. We wouldn't be celebrating Darwin Day the way we are if it wasn't for these five gentlemen. They deserve our respect and our attention as well. There's this wonderful quote by a late biologist, Ukrainian, Theodosis Dubansky, which is nothing in biology makes sense except in the light of evolution. And that's important because if we choose to doubt natural selection, it means that we're not just doubting natural selection. And this is the thing that's so scary for me as an educator, but also as someone who is a humanitarian and someone who believes in honesty in teaching. Because, and I just wrote these things down, when we deny natural selection and its impact, okay, we're denying biology, chemistry, medicine, geology, astronomy, geography, physics, anthropology, genetics, paleontology, mathematics, pharmacology, animal husbandry, farming, and food production. Okay, and that's just a list I made up in the last 15 minutes. Okay, and what does that mean when we deny these incredibly important sciences and fields of study and research? Well, it means that we don't really understand DNA anymore, do we? Or the origins of life, or antibiotics, or fossils, or deep space discoveries, or plate tectonics, or cultural geography, or speciation, gene drift, gene flow, breeding isolates, the ontological nature of the study and the philosophy of science, environmental study of ecologies and trends in extinction in both flora and fauna. And we sort of lose the value and the reason for living what I would say is an evidence-based life. And we owe a lot of this to Charles Darwin. And we should think about it pretty seriously, but with a smile on our face and a song within our heart. If you talk to anybody in the field, myself included, anyone who really trusts natural selection, most people, and you'll see in the Bill Nye debate, and Carl Sagan has said this, and Neil deGrasse Tyson, and pretty much everybody. So one of the beautiful things about science and its approach to understanding the natural world is that if there was a better theory out there, we'd leave natural selection in the dust for it. Because if it's one thing that science does, which is actually really, really healthy, is that it's a self-correcting set of ideas. Okay? It doesn't have to all be stuffed into 6,000 years of history to fit into the box of the New Testament. And we know the importance of Charles Darwin in this country, but we also know internationally his ideas and concepts are important. Because you look and if you do a survey, what comes up as the most important human developments? You probably know of others, but it's very interesting. Fire, farming, relativity, vaccination, the Earth's place in the cosmos, evolution, gravity, DNA, the concept of zero. Evolution tends to be in the top 5 of all of these all of the time. Maybe not in like Georgia and Florida, okay, or Kansas, but sure as heck in New York City and in a lot of other places. And you know, Charles Darwin himself is one of the top 10 personalities, scientists, when people of knowledge talk about the people who really changed or challenged human history. Charles Darwin is one of the people who we tend to see. And it's not just us, and even those in, let's say, the academia or the scientific communities, as most recently Time magazine did a study, or did a survey, excuse me, and said, okay, top 100 people. And you see Charles Darwin comes in at number 12. But I did my own little research, and I said, well, let's take out the religious, the fascists, and the conquerors, which they're all simultaneously the same as far as I'm concerned. And you see that Charles Darwin actually comes in as number 6. And what's interesting is that of all the scientists that made the Time magazine list, you've got Albert Einstein coming in 19, Isaac Newton 21, Da Vinci 29, Benjamin Franklin 35, Thomas Edison 40, Galileo 49, Copernicus 74, Tesla 93. So even amongst his peers, even amongst those who we trust their science as related to their speciality, we find that Darwin comes in at number 12. I think Darwin deserves a pretty big hand. So when we say we're celebrating Darwin Day, we're really celebrating not just the popularity of the man, but the popularity of the brilliance of the observation and the ideas. But of course, we have what I would call made in America ignorance. Not in this room, present company excluded. But if you see in research that natural selection or understanding the natural world or accepting the natural world is still pretty low. In fact, I would make the argument that the next great civil rights issue will be the right to live a secular life. That we've gone through the civil rights movement, we've gone for the most part through the women's movement, women's suffrage, labor rights. We've gone through a whole slew. Now we've LGBT rights, and I think that the next civil rights movement is going to be the secular rights movement. And I think that we all will play a part in that. And I think that Darwin plays a big part in that as well. So you see, and you may have already seen this, so I won't bore you with it, and I know we're pressed for time, that 100% acceptance of the Bible as the natural order of things is remain pretty flat. The nice thing about this, of course, is it shows that if you accept evolution in this country, you're on the upswing here from 9 to about 15%. Very, very important. But another slide, which is really interesting, you know, those people who believe that the world is really recent and God had a hand is about 30%, and you would say, well, humans have evolved over time, and that number is 60%. Well, that looks pretty darn good. But when you actually drill down into the numbers, that number is only about half, because just like we see the formal sophisticated theology of the Roman Catholic Church nowadays was saying, like, well, okay, the natural order occurred, but God started it all. That part, a big chunk of that 60% is that group. So the number of people who just accept natural selection and the natural world is still really a minority opinion in this country. And we see it in here too. Is evolution true, not sure, or is it completely false? And you see we fall pretty low down. This chart is a little old, but we haven't moved up much. And if you actually look at the PISA research, the scary thing is just as we don't accept the natural world, and just as we don't accept the natural order of things, and as we lose our competitive edge because we deny natural selection and Darwin and evolution, we also lose our scientific edge in the process. And if you look at the PISA results, okay, of students from around the world, you find that the United States has fallen to about 20, 24, 26 in science and in mathematics. And I think you can see a direct correlation between the very, very poor or almost substandard scores and the lack of understanding, the lack of acceptance, and the onslaught that our public educators are facing when we are faced with having to teach the controversy. It's so obvious, why didn't anyone think of this before? This is T.H. Huxley, right? It's like one of those V8 movements. Of course we evolved, you know? It makes perfect sense. Well, the reality is the reason why no one thought about this before is because, of course, we had the Dark Ages, and then we needed the Enlightenment, and we needed to sort of catch up in Western culture about 1,000 years lost to the Crusades and other things like that. But starting in about the 17th, 18th century, you actually do start to see, and Darwin depended on a lot of the teachings of these people like Comte de Buffon and Linnaeus and Lamarck and Erasmus Darwin, his grandfather, and Malthus and his population studies. You know, these were the men, like for instance Buffon actually said, well, you know what, the world isn't 7,000 years old, it's 70,000 years old. Okay, now we think that, you know, we laugh at him now, but that's 1750s he's saying this. And look at Ken Ham in 2014. Okay, you know, this is a man who said that you know, the divine, we are all from this divine mold, not the mold like the fungi mold, but from a mold. Okay, and that God's hand is within all of us because we are from this one specific mold. Linnaeus attempted to classify all things, and in his classification, right, we went from non-being to minerals to plants to animals to man to demons to angels to gods. Okay, he was the great classifier. In fact, if you ever think of linear thinking, think of Linnaeus. Okay, that's where this comes from. Okay, he believed in God's benevolent classification of the world. Lamarck, okay, was one of the first people to coin the concept and the use of biology, and actually was the father of the concept of adaptation. This was a man who, for being able to understand that things change over time, key to Darwinian thinking, right? Okay, still believed that the reason why things changed was so they can reach God's perfection. Again, you see fits and starts with a lot of this stuff. And of course, there's Erasmus Darwin, who really was a synthesizer of all of these ideas and concepts, but he believed that all of life was God's first cause. That is, God was the first cause of everything. And then, of course, we know Thomas Malthus with population and diseases destroy, and and this isn't, by the way, including things like stuff, and I have written here, and I'll go through very, very quickly. Hutton and Lyell, who came up with the idea of uniformitarianism in geology. Well, if you know geology, basically what uniformitarianism is looking at rocks and seeing, as Bill Nye said, that there are layers and that those layers equal time and that you can judge time by those layers. Before that, it was the concept of catastrophism. That is, only through catastrophe did things change. And of course, what is the most important catastrophe for most Christian fundamentalists or believers? The Great Flood. Okay, everything came from there. And so you have Hutton and Lyell writing, no, the Earth is much older, and we can prove it, okay, through all of this information. In fact, it was Fitzroy, the captain of HMS Beagle, who wanted a naturalist on his ship and selected Darwin simply because Lyell the geologist wrote a book about the principle called The Principles of Geology. So we owe Lyell a big round of applause for actually helping to move Darwin's career forward. And then, of course, there's Charles. This actually ran in the British newspapers after The Origin of Species was published, and you know, it really ridiculed the man. It made it personal. Okay, and you can understand why this man was such a recluse in his life, aside from wanting to spend all of his time in the lab, and his lab was downhouse. You know, he spent 15 years cataloging mollusks. You know, this is how this guy worked. He operated. You know, this is a man who, in early life, you would think, you know, the two choices that most British aristocrats had in the 19th century was you either became a theologian or you became a doctor, and he failed at both of those things. What can I say? He married his cousin. Do you all know that? Okay.
Wedgwood.
Yeah, yeah. And actually, he was very close to all his children, but especially Annie, who died at 9. And one of the reasons why he was so concerned about natural selection and cross-fertilization and everything that he wrote about in both the natural world related to plants and animals is because he thought that one of the reasons why, and this is what he carried with him till he died, was that one of the reasons why Annie got sick was because he and Emma were cousins. And he thought that that in some way gave his children, without understanding genes, because that was before anyone knew about this stuff, that because of their bloodline, that it made their children more susceptible to illness. And he carried it with him through his whole life.
The same happened in Sarah's family. So they marry each other, they're very weak.
Right, you have this, right, the czars, right? They were all hemophiliacs.
Right.
Right, yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Look at Prince Charles.
What's that?
Look at Prince Charles.
Oh, yes, exactly. This is the British aristocracy. Everybody was an awful lot of inbreeding, right? So we have a very complicated man, we have a brilliant man, we have a very tortured man, but we have a man who stands up to both time and our collective knowledge for his brilliance, for his understanding, and for what he continues to give each of us today in our ability to go forward in our good work. You know, I'm a librarian as well as an anthropologist, so I have to throw this in. You know, this was a guy who was not just a brilliant naturalist, but he was an incredible writer. So, you know, even though there was 20 years between the Voyage of the Beagle and The Origin of Species, he went on a writing spree. And this is only a few of the books that he wrote after The Origin of Species. Variations in Animals Under Plant Under Domestication, Descent of Man, which is equally, where he talks specifically about human evolution. Expression of Emotion in Man and Animals, where he did comparative research. The Movement and Habits of Climbing Plants. And this is just a few of the books. Okay, there's probably about 20 others that he wrote. So while he might be remembered for The Beagle, Voyage of the Beagle, or The Origin of Species and Descent of Man as the big three, the reality is that this man left, you know, if he only had a blog back in 18-something, you know, we'd all be following him. You'd say, screw Paleolibrarian, and you'd be right to do so. You know, why, you know, if he only had a blog, I'd be there. Okay. So I guess the real question is as we celebrate Darwin, and these are the things that I always think about and I try to bring into the classroom, is that really, what do we do in our lives? Okay, how do we make the actions of what we know and understand about natural selection, or even if we only understand tidbits about it and we learned from our peers in this audience, what do we do with it? Is it just a celebration? Are we just saying yay for us? Or how do we really internalize it to externalize it? You know, how do we use this information to inform our lives? And I ask you, does anyone have an insight that they want to share? Yes?
I was very impressed with the BBC movie Creation, which you showed us some time ago.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Very impressed, and I'd be interested in knowing if you wanted to get some single movie out there, some single presentation out there to inform school children of evolution, would you find a better one than that one? Where did you find that one?
That's very good. National.
Monkey process is much the best.
What's that?
Monkey process in the United States, 1930s.
19. Okay, I'm not familiar with it, but I'll look it up. But anybody else? Okay, you don't have to share now. That's okay. For me, what it means is, you know, speaking here and speaking in other places around the country or out of the country, is to always try to bring the calmness of not rationalization, but rationalism to what it is that we do. Because if it's anything that I think Darwin did, and what he did best, was to actually show that the rational natural world, as it is observed in real life, is a much more intriguing story and a much more interesting story than anything that can be found in any book of faith. That it is reason and rationality that makes so much more sense, that is so much more beautiful. And Carl Sagan said it best when he said, if you want to make an apple pie from scratch, you have to start with the universe. And it's brilliant. And this is the same thing that Darwin really talked about when as the foundational information regarding natural selection. That is, we are all starting from the same place. In the end, we all either become food or fossils. Okay. Or both, right. Yes, go ahead. All right. Yes.
When I hear people speaking about miracles, this miracle happened, that miracle, nobody thinks that life is a miracle. That living a rational life is based on rational principles.
The idea that living a rationally based life, okay, is probably the best way, the most honest way we could live, right? Because it doesn't require hope, it doesn't require prayer, it doesn't require correlation without causation, or causation without correlation.
But since we don't know how life originated, really, and if we try to find out, it's still miraculous.
Well, the good thing about being a humanist is that we put our trust in science, right? That we don't put our trust in the metaphysical as part of one of the planks of humanism. That is, not only do we trust each other as humans, but as humanists, we don't look to the metaphysical to understand or to try and answer questions in the physical world. And I think that's also something that we can attribute directly to Darwin, directly to his writing, and to the importance of his writing. Yes?
Well, from what I gather about Darwin is that he was a modest scientist. He was a guy that spent years writing a book on barnacles.
Right.
And yet, unwittingly, he became one of the foremost philosophers of the last 200 years.
Yes, thank you. Right. Larry, it's a very well stated point, and thank you, because I think you're spot on. So I'm going to sort of end here and just do one shameless bit of advertising. This is the book that's coming out that I'm writing. It's called Atheists in Their Own Words, How Non-Believers Make the World Safer, Richer, and Kinder, coming to bookstores in September. I hope that you'll enjoy it when it does come out. We're looking, and we've spoken to people internationally around the world who are not only saying that we can be good without God, but who are actually living this by going into areas of destruction, man-made and natural, helping out, building wells, giving vaccinations, helping people through NGOs and their own work, and doing so without faith. Okay, and showing that we can be good without God. In fact, it's a better way to be in this world, as a matter of fact. So some very important folks are in it, and I hope you'll like it. It's coming out through the Humanist Press. And finally, I'll leave this last slide up if you ever do want to contact me. And by the way, we have someone who will be in the book, Sharif Rahman, who is in the back, who actually has spent a big portion of his life going around the world helping people who are disabled live a better abled life. And doing so, yes, doing it nationally and internationally.
Sharif, stand up. Oh,
Yes.
introduce yourself.
Yeah.
One of the founding member of United Secular American Center for the Disabled and Elderly. And we have 7 branches all over the United States. I'm on the board, so I have to do whatever needs to be done in order to, improve the quality of life of the disabled and elderly in a secular way. That's what I'm doing. That's what I'm committed to.
Bravo. The thing about being an anthropologist is that you meet some, I think, the most interesting, fascinating people in this world. And in reality, I would not even make the cut of my own book because my role and the path I've chosen is a very different one than so many of the wonderful people who are actually interviewed for this book. And it's really, really important. And lastly, if you are interested in reaching out to me, here's my contact information. I'm all over the internet. I'm at Medgar Evers College. The views shared are my own, however brilliant they are. They're not the college's. And please, I do write an active blog, although I've taken the last couple of months off because I'm under a deadline pressure with the book to have that completed, so I haven't really done anything. But I always accept guest posts if you're in the free thought community, and that can be defined along a whole bunch of different ways. Please feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to have your ideas as part of this growing family of writers who are writing for the blog. Thank you very, very much.